for every dollar that's brought in on imported wines, American businesses make $4.52. So you're really hurting American workers and American companies way more than you're hurting the targeted manufacturers. Point.
Welcome to this impromptu bonus episode of the Wine Centric Show. I have a titan of the wine business here with me today, as always. For those of you that are not following the tariff situation, something very significant happened over the weekend, and I connected with this gentleman to fill me in and let the listeners know what's going on and what we can do. So without further ado, I have the co-founder and executive chair of Skurnik Wines, Mr. Harmon Skurnik. Welcome.
Hey, Matt, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I am all of Twitter, I guess. I don't want to use that word about what's going on. So I wanted to jump right in, and then maybe we'll work from the present backwards. The Supreme Court of the United States made a very important ruling with regards to wine tariffs on Friday night. So can we start there and fill us in what all that means?
Sure. Yeah, it was a very important ruling, not just for the wine business, but for import businesses and for American import businesses throughout the country. The Supreme Court ruled on a case which had as its lead plaintiff a small wine company named VOS, which was Victor Schwartz, who was brave enough to take on the president and won. So the Supreme Court declared that the IEEPA tariffs, it's the basis for which Trump implemented the previous tariffs up until the point that they were now declared illegal. And so, the case is very important because it precludes him from just going in and saying, "Hey, I don't like what you're doing. We're going to, slap 200% tariffs on wine going forward, and unless you do this or unless you do that." And which proved to be quite a cudgel in his negotiations around the world. So basically, because the Constitution says that the power to tax, which is what tariffs are, it's a tax on Americans, regardless of what he may have said in his rhetoric, is with Congress and not with the president. So that's really good news that we won't be subject to this uncertainty of just based on his whim being subjected to egregious, in some cases, taxes on these products that we all love, especially if you're in the wine world. We love wines from all over the world, whether it be from Europe, France, Spain, Italy, or South Africa and other far-flung places. We don't want, we've historically been a country that has been very low in terms of tariffs and duties and has encouraged products from all over the world. So, but, it's not over. The fight is not over. It's even though that's good news that he can't do these things at a whim, it's not over, as anybody who's been following this saw him get up there in a press conference on Saturday, I think it was, or Friday, and stated their backup plan, which they've been thinking about for some time, which is to use statutes that are already in place that they tried to avoid using by adopting this IEEPA stance that says I can do whatever I want. Now they have to go through procedures that were kind of established in 1974.
Who wants to do a trip to Tuscany? This is an opportunity to awaken your senses. This is the moment. There is a conscious taste of Tuscany spring renewal retreat. It is April 11th through April 18th. It's 7 days. It is a culinary delight as well as renewal and awakening. You get a spa day, you have breakfast, lunch, you have candlelit dinners, you'll have time for Pilates in the morning, you'll have time for creative time, for journaling, and you get specialty dinners with their chef, Chef Tommaso, a unique experience. And I highly encourage you to reach out to Lauren McLaughlin. Email her, Lauren@ConsciousStrong. That's Lauren@ConsciousStrong, and mention the Wine Centric Show, and you get a $250 discount. Okay, so we're not out of the woods yet because as of Saturday, President Trump, and by the way, we're going to try as much as we can to make this conversation apolitical and stick to business, because I want everybody to understand this and that doesn't mean to you, for me, to understand this on a level of how it affects business, the wine business specifically, and how it affects the end consumer as well. So
That's
having
fine. I mean, that's 100% what the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance, which I am a board member of, that is our, our take on this is to be completely apolitical. This is something that the wine business and many other businesses are united against, regardless of political persuasion. So that's fine with me.
right. And I think it benefits everybody because, as you said, that one person is not making decisions that affect billions of dollars in businesses based on a whim. And that if you're a constitutionalist, if you believe in the United States of America, we were started by a constitution which has checks and balances, and why it's good that tariffs are approved by Congress. So, having said that,
Absolutely, and that's why and this is a decision that's not just for this administration. This is a decision that's going to be precedent for many, many years to come and many, many presidents to come. And the fact that 2 out of the 3 Supreme Court justices that he appointed voted against him on this just speaks to the constitutionality of this and how important a decision it really is. But no, we're not out of the water. There are statutes in place that go back many, many years that allow a president and an administration to impose tariffs on given certain specific instances. And they tried to bypass that in the past because it requires them to do an investigation. It requires them to get comments from the public. It requires them to go through these procedures that might take 6 months or a year to implement them. And so they tried to avoid that, but now they'll have to go ahead and do that. But what he announced on Friday or Saturday when he had his press conference was that he's going to take advantage of one of those statutes right away, which I think is called Section 122, which allows him to temporarily put in a tariff based on some sort of balance of payment deficits, which is what is the complaint here, up to 15% for a period of 150 days. So it's a temporary thing. That's what he's imposed now. He said 10% initially, but then he tweeted on Saturday that he wants to make that 15, which is what he's legally allowed to do. Right now, it looks like, the only thing that's been implemented actually is the 10%, but by tomorrow it might be 15. So, but this is going into effect tonight. So the IEPA tariffs are expiring tonight at midnight, and this new 10 or 15% Section 122 tariff is going into effect tomorrow.
meaning that goods that we've received, wines that we received, or you as your business received, were taxed based on the specific country.
That's
In
right.
somewheres like South
So,
Africa, we're up to 30% tariff. Um, Meaning, with this new act, if you receive a shipment of wines, they will be a global tax of 10
that's
to
correct.
15%. Like,
That's
if you
correct. It
receive
is not country specific any longer. That whole memory of what was it called? Reclamation Day or whatever it was when
yeah,
he got up there and had a different rate for every country, and used that to negotiate with each of these countries is now a global tax. So in a case like South Africa that had 30% before, they will have 10 or 15 depending on what gets implemented. And a country like the UK or Australia that had 10% before might be paying as much as 15 going forward on this temporary tariff. So it's in a way it's not the end of something, but it's also the beginning of a new thing where
right.
we're going to have this new tariff in place temporarily, but at the same time they've also threatened new investigations under these Section 301 and other statutes that they've used in the past. In as recently as 2019, when we had, if you recall, a 25% tariff on all wines and spirits from France and Germany, other places, based on the Boeing Airbus dispute, going back to 5 years in history now. That was a
6 years.
Section 301 tariff. So that required we testified in a number of us in the industry testified in Congress. We had comments period where we were able to object to this, and they'll have to go through that again. But they've announced that it would be kind of on an expedited schedule, because
Okay.
their goal is to make up for all of this revenue that they're currently going to lose by introducing new tariff legislation to try to make up for that. So, like I said, it's really good news, but we're not at the end of the tariffs are not in the rearview mirror. We still have a battle up ahead of us.
We can't claim victory just yet. I appreciate you going through all the legalese with me because I know by profession you are a marketing person and you are a wine wholesaler since
This is the
1989.
last thing I really want to do with my my day to
And
day work, but
yeah,
I'd much rather be tasting wine and talking about all the great wines that Skurnik Wines and Spirits imports. But I've volunteered for this position, and we have a board of five or six members, and we're volunteering our time for this and trying to keep everybody in the industry up to date and current with all of these risks to
right.
our livelihood.
Yeah. And silver lining, as I've heard you say before, never has there been an issue that everybody in the wine trade has been so 100% aligned on. So that's always, that's the
Absolutely.
silver lining thing.
That's why I said, no, regardless of political persuasion, almost everybody in the wine industry, almost everybody is against tariffs, including American wine producers, most of
Right.
them. I mean, there are a few. I mean, there are some farmers in Central California and other places that, are really suffering, and they think tariffs might help them in some way. But the vast majority of American wine producers were against it even before it was implemented. But now that implemented and they've seen the results of it, which is that Canada, for example, has closed off the market for American products, American wines and spirits, which is our largest export partner.
Right.
They're seeing their business dry up around the world. And there are a lot of countries who don't want to import American products right now because of the way that this administration has been approaching it. So, it's tariffs are bad for everybody. They raise revenue, so it's a tax, and they have raised billions of dollars. But it has hurt many American-owned businesses, which we are, and also American wineries.
So I want to ask a couple of things because there's two parts to this. First of all, this is neither here nor there, but do you know what was said that was unlawful? Because this was a lawsuit of Victor Schwartz and the lobbyists that he had hired or the legal team that he
Mhm.
had hired against Trump. And the reason that the tariffs were unlawful, do you know legally why they were deemed unlawful?
Yeah, the one that the first thing is the Constitution says the power to tax is with Congress only, and the second thing is that this did not constitute an emergency. The fact that we had a balance of trade issue, or that we have a trade deficit with Europe or any other country, is something that we've had for the past 50 years. It's not something that's a sudden emergency or qualifies as a sudden emergency. But mainly, the main reason is that the Supreme Court determined this was a tax, and the Congress is the right to pass tax legislation, and not the president in and of himself.
Okay. The other part of this is the big fight of this is that there's a claim that now the United States government will have to refund the money from all of these unlawful taxes. What is the status of that today?
Well, I mean, we certainly believe that uh, if the Supreme Court declared those tariffs unlawful, that any tariffs that were paid into the system, which is amounts to, across multiple industries, amounts to many billions of dollars, ought to be refunded. Um, and Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not address that in their decision.
Okay.
So there's no mechanism in place at the moment to make that happen. What they said in the decision was that this is something that should be determined by lower courts, including the Court of International Trade, which was the first court that the VOS case went up and won, and then that case ended up going to the Supreme Court. That lower court we hope, will make a ruling about the refunds.
And that would be on a state by state case basis, or you think, or that would be a
No, I don't
universal?
think so. It's a federal. thing. Tariffs are federal. So, the importer pays the tariff, we've paid over $6 million in tariffs since they went into effect last year. So that's a lot of money, and that we had to come up with upfront. And the importer is the one who pays those tariffs, and the importer is the one who should receive the refunds. Although there are other arguments to be made. I know that I think it's Governor Pritzker sent a note this morning to the president saying that these tariffs meant that the prices of various goods went up to their constituents, and he thinks all Illinois residents ought to receive a check of $2,000 or something like that. How they refund the money, whether it's to the importer or to the consumer, is to be decided by the courts. But
Well,
it's the
also,
importer who paid the tariffs; they're the ones who should be refunded.
right. Well,
That's our
then,
position.
but just to play devil's advocate there for a second, is then the retailer and the restaurateur is going to say, "Oh, well, I paid I paid part of that tariff as well to you. So now that you're getting refunded, you charge me a higher price for wine. Don't I get refunded on that?"
Yeah. Well, everybody down the line, raised their prices to cover that cost. And, the one who gets screwed is the consumer, unfortunately.
Totally.
You know, we don't want that to happen either. And getting rid of tariffs will be a good way to make that happen. But yeah, the point is that if something was being done and it's declared illegal, should it stand? Should they be able to keep that money? And we don't think so.
Okay.
And we'll see. We'll see. That's to be decided. It hasn't been decided yet.
But that will be motioned forward in the lower courts then? Will it be
Yeah,
taken?
I mean, it could be that a class action suit takes place across multiple industries. We're not sure. It's too early. I mean, this just happened on Friday, and the Supreme Court did not determine how that would take place or how it would be handled, and so there will probably be future lawsuits. It may take a while.
Okay. I want to give the listeners who are listening and maybe a little lost just a little background because, first of all, very simply, there's a three-tier system in the United States regarding alcohol where you have the winery, you have then an importer, then you have a wholesaler. It's actually kind of more of like a fourth tier because then you have a retailer or a restaurant who eventually sells it to the consumer. And each person who is buying that along the way takes their money, makes their revenue, has a markup. So by the time X amount of dollars is getting to you, it's take that 4 times till you as the consumer finally purchase the wine. Having said that, there has always been tariffs. Like this idea of zero tariffs is not accurate, right? Like when you take in wine, you're paying some sort of tax to import that wine and take
Yeah,
that on the dock.
well, we paid customs duties I mean, we've been in business almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And for the first 35 of those years, we paid very de minimis customs duties when goods came in. I think it amounts to something like 19.5 cents a gallon or something like that. It's almost nothing.
Okay.
Which, so really, we've operated for 35 of our 40 years, we've operated as a company with basically no tariffs. I mean, it's been free trade, which is kind of what this country kind of, stands for. And, we're a capitalist country. We believe in free trade. Lowering from most of my life, politicians would talk, especially in the Republican Party, would talk about lowering barriers to trade. I mean,
Right.
free trade was very much an American idea, and not every country around the world feels the same way. I mean, we pay tariffs, or they pay tariffs on stuff that we export to them, often over the years. But on imports to this country, in the wine business, has been almost nothing. And really, the 2019 Boeing dispute that caused the 25% tariffs was the first time we ever had any tariff experience, which, we were running scared. I mean, they're trying to put us out of business, that kind of thing. So that's when we created at that time our trade group called the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance, which is a lobbying organization that has many wine and spirits importers as members. And our sole purpose is to fight the tariffs because we believe in free trade. We believe that if you're a wine consumer and you love Chablis or you love Brunello, that these products can't be made in the United States. They are unique to those terroirs and those places, and you should have the right to be able to buy them at whatever without having to pay a tax that amounts to 15% or 30% or 200% of the value of that product to the government in order to have the right to experience that wine. We think that it should be open. And what you mentioned about the three-tier system is important in this argument, because one of the arguments that's made pro-tariff is that they do it to support American manufacturing and support American workers. Because of the three-tier system, as you mentioned, which was originated out of prohibition, where when we had repeal in 1930s, so we don't want the sale of alcohol to be controlled by organized crime, et cetera. So we want to make sure that we have three tiers. We have an importer who brings the goods in, who's an American company, who sells to a wholesaler, who's an American company, who sells to a retailer, who's an American company. And yes, there's different levels of profit margin that's taken on each of those tiers. But what it means is that every time you bring in an imported product, many American companies make a lot more on that product than the foreign company does. And that's unique to the wine business, because we don't have a three-tier system in a less regulated industry like handbags, or, we use this argument or this example often. Let's say Louis Vuitton, for example, who sells these expensive handbags from France. They can own the wholesaler that brings it in. They can own the retail store on Fifth Avenue that sells it. So if you tariff their product, you might be impacting many French-owned companies. But in the wine trade, no matter where it comes from, it's American companies who employ American workers in every stage of the distribution channel. So there's a that said for every dollar that's brought in on imported wines, because of the three-tier system, American businesses make $4.52. So you're really hurting American workers and American companies way more than you're hurting the targeted manufacturers and points.
Yeah. So it's a $3.52 net profit for every dollar we spend on that, which is
Right.
important because that's a lot of money. Okay. You were saying that it was a customs fee as opposed to a tariff. So custom fees still are the same then. And then on top of that, we are paying these extra tariffs. I just want to clarify.
So I know it's legal details, but I am very much in the midst
For
of
sure.
all this. And this new tariff that they're trying to implement tonight is in addition to those customs fees. The previous IEPA tariffs were in lieu of the customs
Okay.
fees. So it's a small amount, but we now have to resume paying those fees on top of the tariffs going forward. I think it was probably out of frustration. Okay, we'll give you
Gotcha.
that too. We'll give you that too.
Yeah. No, so that makes it even more impactful, these proposed new tariffs.
Exactly.
Okay. So U.S. Wide and Trade Alliance started back in 2019. In 2019, when these things happen, it feels like the wine world was able to band together a little bit to mitigate some of the increase, because I think maybe some of the wineries in the EU said, okay, we'll take a little less profit. And the importer said, we'll take a little less profit. And everyone was able to like manage it a little bit. And so the pricing was somewhat incremental in most cases. Now, also that was juxtaposed with, one could argue, the wine business as a whole had not taken any major increases in over 20 years. I mean, you probably in the 1990s paid almost $20 to $25 for retail for a bottle of, let's just say, Sancerre, and it was still around the same thing circa 2019. Now that's obviously a lot different. So you're shaking your head, maybe, kind of. So,
well, I think
yeah,
that,
would love your insight.
that may be true for some wines, but there are a lot of other wines, like Burgundy, for example, that are double the
True.
price or triple the price that they were 20 years ago. So there's been quite a bit of
We could argue
inflation.
that's the fault of marketing.
Well, yeah, or supply and demand and scarcity too.
Well, we were talking about that in 2019, the 25% across the board, we were somewhat able to mitigate so that the prices
Yes.
weren't so super shocking to the end consumer.
Well, that would basically, because it was the first time we were dealing with this, we went to our suppliers, many importers, including us, went to our suppliers and said, hey, we have this 25%, we can raise our prices by 25% and you're going to lose business. Maybe you can help us out. Can we share the tariff and maybe 50-50, or Or are you willing to cover it entirely? And maybe we won't raise your prices at all. For the most part, there was a lot of share at that time. So prices went up gently, not they didn't go up anywhere near 25% at that time. And there were also some loopholes, if you recall, that, it only applied to wines that were up to 14.5% alcohol. So if the winery labeled it 15%, they didn't have to pay the tariff, for example. So plus it only lasted for like a year, a little over a year. When Biden was elected, it got repealed. So there really wasn't a lot of time for that 25% to get in the system, through the system, and have a lot of price increases. If it had remained in place, it probably would have. And then fast forward 4 years when the new administration came in and reinstituted this new tariff structure, suppliers weren't as willing to help mitigate those costs this time. They were like, we've seen this movie before, we'll sell to other countries. You'll just have to raise the prices. And that's what happened. And, it took a while because there was a lot of inventory in the pipeline already.
Yep.
But we were just starting to see the real impact of these tariffs. And because, it's been since last April that they went into effect, and now it's almost a year. And a lot of the inventory that's now in our warehouses is tariff affected and prices are higher.
Right. Give us a little background into your business as an example, because a wholesaler of your size, and I don't know, on like a national level, you're in, I think, 9 markets as a wholesaler, but you're a national importer.
That's right.
Probably be considered, I mean, for people that listen, I assume that everybody knows Skurnik, but I should say you are one of the finest wine importers in the country. 2 of your most exciting brands we've featured on the show before with Jerome Dehors and
I saw
of
that.
course Johannes Selbach. Yep.
Yes.
So that was great. I mean, and that's the level of wines that you guys represent and do a good job. So I think just for perspective, you guys would be considered like a medium tier in terms of
Yeah.
revenue size.
Yeah, we're certainly not the smallest importer out there, and we're certainly not the largest. I mean, you've got Southern Glazers, and you've got RNDC, and you've got Reyes, and all these big spirits, mainly
Breakthrough.
spirits focused importers and distributors that are billion-dollar companies, and I would say we're a large small company or a small large company, one or the other. But mid-tier would be appropriate.
Okay, so mid-tier, and by the way, I don't think RNDC can go in that conversation anymore as they're pulling out and
Well, they're still pretty large, but they are shrinking by the day.
by the day.
It's really
And I'm sure I'm sure a big part of that was the tariffs, especially with their California business and selling wine. I would have to imagine.
I really don't. I wouldn't venture to guess. I don't know what possible mismanagement may have occurred. I don't know that the tariffs played that big a role there. I don't know. It's possible.
Okay. Neither here nor there. Anyway, typically for perspective, when you're buying goods for your markets, you're typically working on like a 3-month inventory. Okay. I was saying that typically you're working, I'm guessing, on about a 3-month inventory projection.
I think with our most successful products, it's about a 3-month. That would be 4 turns a year. Be very happy with that on everything, but unfortunately, not everything turns that rapidly. Yeah, a business like ours, whether an importer or wholesaler, it depends on turnover and cash flow. I mean, we love wine, but we don't want to collect it for too long, except for the wines that are going to our personal cellar. We want to collect those and enjoy them for over many, many years. But the lifeblood of our business is cash flow, which is why tariffs can be so destructive to a company like ours. That I mentioned earlier, that over the course of not even a year, we paid $6 million in tariffs. I mean, we had to come up with that cash. We had to borrow from the bank in order to do that. Now, smaller importers had to pay less, but they even have less ability to do so. And there were a couple of casualties. A couple of importers went out of business. And I know that there are some who are really struggling because of the tariffs. You mentioned one of the larger ones, but certainly the small guys who can't afford to come up with this cash upfront. It's not like income taxes where you make the money and then at the end of the year, supposedly you pay by April 15th, you pay for the previous year. You got to come up with this money in advance,
right?
Before you get the goods. And so it can be quite a strapping experience on a business, and that's why, it affects our ability to hire, it affects our ability to invest, and it affects our ability to succeed.
We're talking about how these tariffs can affect businesses. And it's interesting because in New York, it's a unique situation where you're paying your wineries on about 90 days terms. So you're not actually paying for your goods. But then in New York, you're not getting paid for 30 days, even once you sell them. So that's a problem as well. I wanted to get back to the revenue generating and how this is affecting American jobs. And if you could walk me through that, so walk the listeners and the viewers through that. Like, it's not just affecting, I mean, yes, there's the passion project of it, right? Like, I go to an Italian restaurant and I can't drink my Chianti Classico or my Brunello or my Barolo. Yes, that's unfortunate, but I'm going to guess that like half of the, or maybe some of these people don't care about that, right? Bringing it back to the economic ramifications. So,
I
I
think
mean,
your example, if I can interrupt for just a
yeah,
second, I mean, I think your example is a good one. That is one of the arguments we make with Congress people. If you have a local Italian restaurant, it is essential that they have authentic Italian wines on the list. I mean, yeah, they're Sangiovese is made in California, and Nebbiolo in a very, very small way, but these wines are unique to that country, just like Italian food products are. So, it's really it's kind of critical to the restaurant's profitability and success that they have affordable Italian wines, because American consumers who go to an Italian restaurant have an expectation to drink Italian wine with their meal. And, if they went to an Italian restaurant and all they had on it was Cab and Chard from California, they might be a little disappointed, I think, right?
I mean,
Certainly
for
in New
sure.
York, they wouldn't.
I mean, listen, the people who are listening to the show, if they're tuning into a show that's called Wine Centric, yes, probably. But I can also see most of the constituents out there and be like, wine already has this elitist connotation and that we're trying to fight against. So it's like, oh, well, what do I care? I mean, it's ignorance is bliss. If you've never had a Barolo with a a pasta and truffle dish, then you don't know. So you're like,
Right.
what's the big deal? So I'm just saying for the average person, like,
Sure.
yes, I agree with you 100%. If I can't drink champagne or I have to pay more for, Chablis and white Burgundy than we already do, yes, I'm annoyed
Yes.
by that.
Mhm.
But 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 I also want people to understand, like, this is like you were saying, take us through where that around that $3.52 net profit comes through, because we're talking jobs, we're talking trucking, we're talking
Yeah.
warehousing, we're talking all this stuff. And if you as a distributor are not buying those things, that is a serious loss of revenue and money going into the cash flow going into the economy. Is that kind of where you're at?
Absolutely. And, and we see the results of it in stark uh, highlight with the layoffs that just came about with some of the largest distributors. Breakthrough just laid off 500 people. RNDC laid off a whole bunch of people. The big wineries in California who don't have the Canadian market anymore. That's one big reason, but there's other reasons. There's a large oversupply of grapes and the demand is dropping, but they're laying off people, and some of them are going outright out of business. This is having a direct effect on uh, abilities for companies to be profitable, hire people. It's causing some layoffs. And so, we have enough inflation on its own merit to add additional 15 or 20%. And then on top of that, every level of the way, every tier is incredibly damaging, I think. And to the Italian example, I mean, I agree with you that some people may not care, but I think it's important to the restaurateur that they have authenticity in their products too. So,
For sure.
but yeah, it's really not
And
business
I'm playing
friendly.
devil's advocate there, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
for the average person that,
Certainly, there are many people who couldn't care less about wine. You know that
right.
they're not listening to your podcast.
Yeah, you're probably right. Although maybe it'll be quoted like on CNN or something. I don't know. Which, by the way, Victor Schwartz was on the other night. So that was pretty cool
He
that,
was on everything the other
yeah, he
night. He
was
was
on
on
everything the
Fox
other night.
News everywhere.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. That is good news for our business. And I just want to wrap that up in a nice bow. So you think about it like somebody who works, let's say in the sales level for Skurnik Wines. I don't need to disclose what they make, but let's just say you can make a nice living as a sales representative in New York City or New Jersey or
Yes,
Westchester or wherever, and you're feeding a family. You're going on vacations, perhaps to California wineries or other economies around you.
absolutely.
buying wines, going to restaurants, and not only that, but you're employing truck workers, you're employing
Mhm.
warehouse, or
That's right.
you're feeding warehouse workers. The paperwork that goes into all these things, that when we have to pay too much money to import goods and we just say stop, all that cash flow stops, and thus the economy suffers.
And what do all those people that you mentioned, all those workers have in common? They're all American citizens.
Right.
So if they're out of work and the company's not doing well and the company goes under, and this is the rhetoric that we're going to be helping America by tariffing foreign goods is flawed. It's badly flawed because it hurts American workers and American business way more than it does the foreign manufacturers. I mean, I know that this is not related to the wine business, but China, who exports a lot to America because of this tariff situation, they're just selling their goods to other countries and they're making deals with all other countries, and it's really not hurting them all that much. But there are, how many importers of Chinese goods are there, around the country who are struggling and are going to go out of business. So we focus our efforts on the wine industry, but it's affecting multiple every industry that imports any products from anywhere.
Well, apparently also not related to tariffs, but the Chinese are making some good wine these days. I don't know if you guys import any or have looked into
I
that.
hear that. We don't import any, and I haven't tasted a whole bunch, so I've heard that that's the case, but, I think they're pretty new at it. They're making a lot of progress. I don't know if they're approaching the level of quality, of Europe yet, but it's possible.
I was just speaking about that. I had
Yeah,
Kevin Zurelli was in
yeah.
North Carolina at Winston-Salem last week, and he showed me the paper of the winettes. They played in Winston-Salem like, 25, 30 years ago. And of course, your brother, I think, was the
Yes,
guitarist in the
yes, lead
band.
guitarist, Michael. Yeah,
The guitarist, yeah. And actually, that reminded me because he was saying that the Chinese actually grow more grapes, not necessarily wine grapes, but more grapes than anybody in the world. So he's like, if
really.
anybody should be able to do it, they should be able to do it. Anyway,
Yeah, I think they should. They
yeah,
certainly have, and they have one of the largest countries. So I'm sure there are some climates, microclimates, and soils that are right for grape growing. I mean, there's a lot of investment going on there. There's no question about that.
yeah, it'll be interesting. Okay, so you were instrumental in bringing US WTA to the forefront and creating advocacy for the wine trade. What are the people who are listening, whether you're in the business or not in the business, what can they do to help get involved and help push this agenda, this anti-tariff agenda forward?
Well, there is a uswinetradealliance.org, I think it is. We have a Facebook page, US Wine Trade Alliance. We have a donor box where people can actually donate small. Any amount is welcome because we operate solely as a nonprofit and on people's donations. And this lobbying stuff is really, really expensive. And so we welcome any membership. Generally speaking, it's financed by the trade. If you are an importer, however small, medium, or large, we welcome your support because we can't operate without the financial support of our constituents. And like you said, this is an issue where we have almost 100% unanimity on uh, fighting the tariffs on the wine trades. But we keep our members informed of all these goings on as much as possible. And with knowledge comes strength. And so right now, especially, things are changing every day. And just like you are asking me these questions, all of our members are asking the same questions. And I think that everybody is pretty they're not happy about tariffs, but they're happy that we've formed this organization that keeps us relevant, keeps us informed, and we have, for our benefit, one of the influential lobbying firms in Washington D.C. working on our behalf. And so we are much more prepared for a fight like this than we were in 2019 when we got hit blindsided. Like I said, we never had tariffs before, and like suddenly, boom, what are we going to do? And so we formed this organization, which has done a really great job. Ben Anif is the president. I mean, I'm involved, and I can answer a lot of these questions, but he's like our inside super pro on this, and he knows he could have a second career in Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist himself. That's how knowledgeable and how impactful he is. So
Cool.
we,
Yeah, I
we
know
owe a lot
Ben.
to Ben.
We'll chat. We'll chat with him as well on this. So, what can you tell us then? USWTA, U.S. Wine
Mhm.
Trade Alliance. You can go donate to the page or be informed if you go to their .org page or the Facebook page and keep informed that way. And also,
Mhm.
you can donate, and that'll help keep the lobbyists,
We would accept all donations.
yeah, at Congress's door there. What can you tell us, like, what are next steps? We already identified that we're going to see about refunds. I don't know if that's going to necessarily affect. I mean, like, I think it'll help importers and wholesalers cash flow, which could be a good thing, but I don't know how much that's going to affect, everybody on the streets or the day-to-day consumer. So what
Well,
do we know? Like, what is factual for the next steps, and what we can hope for? Best
well,
case.
Well, I mean, if we are successful with the refunds, it does help with the cash flow and it does help with investing. It does help with hiring. It does help with reinvesting in the business and being able to buy more. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it would be good for everybody. So, and also help to lower prices if we can do away with the tariffs ultimately. No, like I said, it's in a lot of ways, we're at the beginning stages of a new phase because these new investigations that are going to take place, these new Section 301 investigations, where they have already said the U.S. Trade Representative, whose name is Jameson Greer, has already said that they're going to go after the EU, for example, on their digital services taxes, which is an issue that's a thorn in their side for years already. Just to give a quick definition of that, Europe has been taxing uh, what they call when they refer to digital services taxes, it's often referred to as the GAFA tax, which is Google, Apple, Amazon, et cetera. Those American companies operating in the digital sphere in Europe are getting taxed on income. The U.S. Trade Representative objects to that because it only impacts companies of a certain size, and therefore it's only by that statute, it's only affecting American companies. So they are they threaten tariffs on wine and spirits
As a retaliation.
because wine and spirits is something that's so culturally close to the European economy and the European mindset. It's always wine and spirits that they end up threatening. So not only did they in 2019 impose tariffs on wine and spirits in response to a Boeing and Airbus trade dispute, but now an Apple, a Google trade dispute, they're threatening tariffs on wine and spirits too. So, we're concerned about that. We're going to keep our eye on that investigation, which they say is going to be expedited. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, unfortunately. I wish we could say the Supreme Court came out with this decision and tariffs are now in the rearview mirror. We don't have to worry about them anymore, but I
Right.
unfortunately can't give you that good news.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a step in the right direction. Well,
No doubt.
yeah, I certainly appreciate your time. And I know that you will continue to drink good wine one way or the other. And we will figure out how to get it to the restaurants, the retailers, and ultimately the end consumer. So,
Well,
uh,
thank you for what you do as well. You run a great podcast. I've listened to a couple episodes, and thank you for keeping us all informed.
my pleasure. Thanks for joining. And for all of you out there, join USWTA. That's United States Wine Trade Alliance. And go look on the back of the bottle. And if it says Skurnik wines are imported by Skurnik, you know that you will drink deliciously.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. I really appreciate that. We've worked really hard over the course of almost 40 years to develop that kind of reputation, and we don't take it lightly. We really appreciate that kind of response, and that our name on the back of a bottle does elicit that kind of assurance. And we worked really hard to attain that.
And it shows. Thanks, Harmon.
Thanks so much.